Welcome to the INFOWARS Nightly News. I'm Darren McBreen. It is Thursday, November 6th, 2014. Here's a quick look what's coming up.
Tonight, as Monsanto pushes dirty tricks against GMO labeling, activists are waking across the nation. And a Hollywood insider speaks out against false flag terror. That's next on the INFOWARS Nightly News.
And I am sick of being a nice guy and putting up with all this bull while a bunch of criminals run all over us and walk all over us.
Well, in the aftermath of the midterm elections, we were all very disappointed to find out that the two GMO labeling propositions were defeated. One of them was in Oregon, the other was in Colorado. And this is very strange because we know from all major publications that the American public overwhelmingly supports GMO labeling. Yet when it comes to these propositions, they always end up voting it down for some reason, just like they did in the midterms and like they did in Washington State and in California just a couple of years ago. And Anthony Gucciardi joins us now to help make sense of all this. What the hell is going on? The majority of Americans, they want GMO labeling, yet these propositions are failing. What's going on?
Well, you know, everyone's asking what is going on because they're going out, they're saying we support GMO labeling, everyone we talk to supports it. We're going to get into some polls that show over 96+% of the United States public in these major polls support GMO labeling. But then specifically, we're going to talk about why these elections are failing. Why every single time GMO labeling is being pushed in states is being shot down. It comes down to some key dirty tricks. It even comes down to Monsanto literally impersonating the FDA, Stanford, some other organizations. And this is not conspiracy theory. This is the Huffington Post is now agreeing with us. I mean, we're at the final frontier on the battle for GMO. But let's specifically talk about, this is from the article that was just up yesterday, how Monsanto keeps halting GMO labeling despite over 96+% approval. And I wrote this after I got home at about 12 a.m. due to the extended coverage here that we were doing of the elections. And I had to write it because I just was so flabbergasted with all the emails saying, why is GMO labeling not succeeding? Well, let's talk about it. The New York Times found that 93+% were in support of GMO labeling. MSNBC, 96%. Reuters, NPR, 93%. Washington Post, 95%. Consumer Reports, 95%. ABC News, 93%. These are not website polls which show the same thing. These are real, serious polling agencies every single time. So you say, if that's true, then what's going on? Something's happening. There's a disconnect between the intellectual result of saying, I'm going to support GMO labeling, and when they actually push the ballot. So what is it? It comes down to a dirty trick, primarily, where Monsanto is pretending through paying PR firms, we're going to get into the actual research, to say that it's going to cost you more. Because you've heard that, haven't you?
No, these are the scare tactics that you see. People in Colorado and Oregon, they were absolutely bombarded by these political ads. And most of the time, it was straight out of like an Edward Bernays, who's the father of propaganda. I mean, it looked like it was scripted by Edward Bernays, you know. This is a guy that's wearing a cowboy hat who says he's for family farms, and he is scaring people into believing, hey, man, if you vote yes on this, your grocery bills are going to skyrocket. I have a consumer's report that says that it only annually cost the families $2.30. That's not $2.30 every time you go to the grocery store. That's $2.30 a year. And I think that's a small price to pay to know what's actually in your food. So these are scare tactics, and unfortunately, a lot of people fell for it.
Well, the funny thing is, if we actually look at the source, people say, you know, where are they getting the information that it's going to cost me that much more at the grocery store? What's the source, the intel? And I actually found through research, and now Huffington Post is confirming this, is linked up in the same article where it shows how they misused an FDA quote, which we can talk about. But specifically, this is from the Huffington Post, Monsanto paid a PR firm with expertise in fighting recycling legislation, so they worked on behalf of the soda pop industry, to generate a misleading quote-unquote study that was designed to show the proposition raising food prices by hundreds of dollars per state resident per year. So it wasn't even real. And this is not the worst they're getting away with, though. Wow. They made an FDA quote up. The quote said that, quote, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, says a labeling policy like Prop 37, which was California's initiative to label GMOs, would be, quote unquote, inherently misleading. And the FDA went on record and said that they never said that. and they don't actually support things like this. So what does Monsanto do? Well, they say, that's fine. They said Stanford supports us. They used it in TV ads, and they mailed out things with Stanford ads, logos on the ads saying, we support Monsanto, GMO labeling is unnecessary. As it turns out, Stanford denied actually ever supporting them and said it was completely fake as well. So this company is doing things that the average person could lead to a $250,000 fine, 20 years in prison, three-year supervised release, and even worse. And they're doing this over and over again to literally deceive people. That is why there's a disconnect between 96+% support of GMO labeling and actual polling results, because Monsanto is lying to them. They are a corrupt, evil corporation.
Unbelievable. And, you know, they were spending millions and millions of dollars on these political ads, and we're actually going to take a look at one right now. This was your typical ad that was run in Colorado. It was no on Proposition 105. Let's take a look.
Agriculture is crucial to Colorado's economy. Proposition 105 would hurt Colorado food producers by forcing them to use misleading labels that conflict with national standards. Please stand with Colorado's farmers and vote no on 105.
There you go, folks. That was the best lies money can buy. And you notice at the end of these ads, they never say, sponsored by Monsanto Corporation, the creators of Agent Orange, because nobody trusts Monsanto, you know, and if they knew it was sponsored by Monsanto, they would probably recognize it for the BS that it really is.
Well, of course, Monsanto sets up these groups, and we'll actually talk about the key players in all these groups. They pump millions into them to oppose GMO labeling on their behalf, but then they don't have to say it was paid for by Monsanto because Monsanto has these front groups. So specifically, when we're looking at things like Prop 37, let's look at the money that's going into this just to defeat your ability to know what you're eating. This money is going to offend you and attack you in ways that you are not told and make sure that you're in the dark. So specifically, Monsanto donated, again, this is all in this inclusive article up on INFOWARS.com from Natural Society, just syndicated everywhere. From Monsanto, $7.1 million. DuPont, $4.9 million. Pepsi, loving PepsiCo, paying $2.1 million to make sure you don't know that you're buying GMOs. Bayer, $2 million. Dow, $2 million. Syngenta, $2 million. BASF, $2 million. Kraft Foods, they care about you so much. They want to make sure your children eat GMOs in their macaroni and cheese every single night, and they don't know about it. Coca-Cola, they want to use aborted fetuses and GMOs, $1.4 million. Nestle, General Mills, and just to bring up something in the middle of this that is kind of inspirational. Let's talk about Kellogg's for a second, who donated $790,000 to make sure you don't know that there are GMOs in their cereal. Well, as it turns out, Consumer Reports decided that you should know, and they did a test and they found that 100% of their corn in their leading cereals were GMO, Roundup Ready GMOs. There's already now strikes against Kellogg's. There's already boycotts. There's hundreds of thousands of shares on Facebook about this fact. There are people going out to grocery stores labeling with massive GMO stickers on the Kellogg's products. So people are freaking out about this. It ultimately is coming down to people labeling it themselves and making their own decisions. But look at this group of people that want you not even to be aware. And we're not even talking about banning GMOs. We're talking about millions of dollars to make sure you have no idea what you're putting in your mouth and your children's mouth. And then, like you said, I want to hear what you were telling me about this farmer going up and saying, ladies and gentlemen, I'm a homegrown farmer, and I think GMOs are perfectly safe despite over 13 studies linking them to every single type of cancer, and Roundup is great. It pollutes the water supply, makes you infertile, and kills your children. I mean, they don't know the intel. That's the problem. They don't know the information. That's why we are here.
Well, and here's the thing, and when it comes down to it, these propositions, it wasn't a judgment on whether or not GMO food is bad for you or not, so to say. So if you're someone, for example, who perhaps you're not concerned that it's a health hazard, well, this was not a judgment on whether or not GMO food is bad or if it's good. This was simply about labeling it. This was so a consumer that we could go in, read the ingredients, and see if there's any GMO-based products on there and decide for ourselves. We have a right to know. That's what this whole thing was about.
Well, it's just like if you want to know the carbohydrates in your food, or if you want to know, is there sugar in this food?
Exactly.
Is there a large amount of fat in this food? Well, are there or creations that have been split with genes in billion-dollar machines created by Monsanto, sprayed with Roundup that's known to cause infertility and damage your genes? Is that in my food? Gee, maybe I should have a right to know about that. And that's why 96+% of people in the United States agree with that. And we're not even getting into election rigging at this point also. We're not even getting into
And I wondered about that.
voter fraud, which is also another huge thing that you can bet Monsanto's got their hand in. This is just deception at a base level, making consumers think that, yeah, you know, I do want to label GMOs, but I also don't want to pay hundreds of dollars more on my grocery bill, which is a total lie.
Yeah. Well, I thought what was disturbing, okay, naturally the TV heads, they're going to get bought and sold on these commercials, but they also targeted the newspapers, and these are the corporate-owned newspapers. But what they're targeting here is a smarter person who's going to look into it. So this is basically someone who's doing the research, and they trust their local newspaper, so naturally that's where they're going to go and try to figure it out. And some of these newspaper articles are horrific. I found one the other day published by The Atlantic, and where, of course, they're basically calling you a conspiracy theorist if you want GMO labeling. This is what it says in The Atlantic. No widely accepted science supports the idea that GMOs are inherently dangerous to people's health. Opposition to GMOs is nothing more than a dangerous mania. And the people in the grip of it are akin to those who refuse to vaccinate their children or who deny that human activity is changing the Earth's climate. It goes on to say that the paranoia is driven by internet rumors. Basically, they're saying you're stupid. And by the way, I found out one of the underwriters for The Atlantic, Monsanto Corporation.
Well, of course, but here's how it works. There's two levels to this. There is, of course, the kind of Midwestern individual that just watches television, doesn't really know what's going on, but supports farmland. And then Monsanto has their propaganda commercials like that guy just saying, hey, you know, we're great, GMOs are great, they make us money. You don't want to pay more money to have labeling, do you? And that works. But then the second tier is they know they're intellectual individuals, like everyone watching right now, that are going to go on Google and they're going to Google, are GMO foods safe?
Sure.
So they target the search engine optimization, they pay writers, and they have this kind of pseudo-intellectual, weird, fake collegiate science advocacy where they fake Stanford quotes and they fake FDA quotes and they just use so much BS where they act like you're not intellectual if you don't like GMOs and you're not cool and you're not smart and the scientific community has fully accepted it. It's just like they do with fluoride. They say, there is no actual evidence that fluoride is harming your brain and harming children, but then the federal government research journals admit that it's actually neurotoxic and damaging children's brains, and then the next day, within that same week, the government says, yes, we do need to reduce levels.
Yeah, it reminds me of the tobacco corporations. You know, back in the day, they used to say there was no link between cigarette smoking and cancer.
So you know who did that,
and
right?
Here we go. Who's
his
that?
name was, we're getting into a whole bunch of subjects, but his name was, I think, Ingram Olkin, and he worked at Stanford, which Monsanto's buddy-buddy with. They have a whole wing there.
Yep.
And he did he's called the father of statistical lies. This came out a couple of years ago. We did an article about it. And he made up the theory that tobacco actually helped your heart because all the studies showed it was causing heart damage and everything like that.
4 out of 5
Specifically
doctors
cigarettes, by the way.
recommend Camel cigarettes.
Yes,
Remember
exactly.
that? Yeah.
Cigarettes with tar and everything, not just straight tobacco, cigarettes. And he was called the father of statistical lies because he was able to show on his breakdown that it was helping your heart, despite all of the actual real information. That's the same guy that's now saying that GMOs are perfectly safe and organic is the same as non-organic. And that was the big story a couple years ago, that there's no reason to buy organic. It's the same as conventional. It has no nutritional support.
So
The
he has
father
a
of
proven
statistical
track
lies did
record
it.
from the tobacco industry, and now he's working for GMO label or against GMO labeling.
Yeah, exactly. Those are the type of people that go on and they say, you're unscientific if you don't support GMO labeling. So I guess we're unscientific here with the actual stats, the actual data, looking how Monsanto fakes FDA quotes, Stanford quotes, pays off people. The father of statistical lies is on their side, though, so you just better bow down.
Well, let's talk about this. There is a massive revolving door when it comes to Monsanto executives and positions in the federal government. And we're talking about Monsanto executives, CEOs, scientists, I call them mad scientists, but they have been placed in all sorts of federal positions that include the Department of Justice, the FDA commissioner, the advisor to the Department of Energy, U.S. Secretary of Commerce, director of the USDA, the chief administrator of the EPA. Once there was an acting director of the FBI, deputy U.S. Attorney General, U.S. senators, U.S. congressman. Donald Rumsfeld, as you know, he was the CEO for Searle, who ended up merging with Monsanto, and he successfully had aspartame legalized, and then he was appointed the Secretary of Defense. So, I mean, there is a massive revolving door.